And I'm back from my little road trip, and I got through 2 audiobooks. One of the books I read was this Bear Creek Collection Volume 1. This is by Robert E. Howard, the famous writer of Conan the Barbarian, other things as well, but Conan the Barbarian, that's the one that he's known for, and there's no surprise, is what I would say here. I have to grade this thing. If I had to grade this thing, no, I did grade this thing. I graded this thing a 3 out of 5 stars. I wish it was more. I really did. I was really looking forward to Old Western kind of fiction. Sometimes I go through these phases once a year where I just want to consume Old West. I'm not sure why. I usually go to pulp comics for this, but then I was like, wait, what? Robert E. Howard does Old West? Okay, let's put that on my phone and let's set them up for the road trip. So I did Collection Volume 1, which I rated about 3 stars, I would say. I mean, it might have been a 3.5. It might have gotten up to 3.5, maybe. It could have almost been a 4, but I'm like, it wasn't quite a 4. And I have a very rigorous set of rules for when I'm rating books, because a 4 for me is something like I would recommend this for other people to read, even if it might not be a genre that they'd be cool with. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it would be a hard sell for me to kind of push this on anyone. Do I think it was a fun read? Yes. There are 10 chapters in this, or 10 short stories. This is an anthology for all intents and purposes. There's no continuity in any of this. So I do recommend, like, if you have time and you want to check it out just to see how Robert E. Howard wrote cowboy slapstick comedy old westerns, then give it a shot. You know, I think it'd be fun for the experience of it, which is why it's a 3 for me. They're about half an hour each, 40 minutes. There are some characters that appear multiple times, especially for the slapstick comedy brawling. There are very few people who rated this book on Goodreads. But one thing that did shock me, because I just checked Wikipedia, is that Brakenbraw here, this character was the most financially viable character of Robert E. Howard's writing career back in the 30s. So I didn't know that. I wouldn't have believed it based on what I read. Now, were they amusing? Were they fun? They were at times, but they were so over the top with the violence. Humor was so over the top that it felt like a cartoon, like I was reading a cartoon. It was very slapsticky. That's not to say that people didn't sometimes get dead, but they did. And then the storyline itself, the flow of each of these stories was very much in that simple way that I'm familiar with from the Conan stories. But they don't necessarily start like Robert E. Howard is known for storying, which is in media res, like in the middle. So it basically starts inside the Act 2 and then gets you into Act 3. That's how Conan stories, like, that's how they're so action-packed and they move so fast. They feel like very action pushy. I'm not sure the word I'm looking for there, but you know what I'm saying. In media res is what it's called. And these kind of started in that sense of like, hey, something's going on, here's the quest, and then you're off. But it still did a little bit of a setup. There was still a little bit of an Act 1 for each of these short stories before they set you off on the typical quest, like he's got to find a ring, or he's got to get his cousin out of some problem, or some friend out of jail, or he's got to pick up some woman from some city because to get him married, I don't know. There were a lot of the same sort of themes here. It's very simple is what I'm saying. There was literally about, I don't know, half a dozen types of setups and stories for this. And so it kind of got repetitive. That being said, these weren't meant to be read as part of a collection. These appeared in periodicals, right? So you'd kind of get to return back to the antics of Brakenbraw. So I would say that this first book, it was amusing to me because it was something I never expected. And it was amusing. It was amusing is what I would say. So on the way to Montreal, I listened to Collection 1. On the way back to Ontario, I listened to Collection 2. Maybe it's because I was a little bit, not burnt out by Collection 1. It wasn't really landing on me as a 3 out of 5 star. And this one I would probably give it 2 out of 5 star. I would probably give it a 2.5, right? But it's the redundancy, the repetition of the stories maybe got a little bit too redundant for me. So Collection 2 here, they're in the 40 to 50 minute range for each of these short stories. They did feel a little longer. Now that I think of it, I was like, wow, they're still going. Anyways, so I would recommend these if you're curious to see how the Conan writer writes slapstick westerns. That's it. Otherwise, a 2 for me is starting to get to the point where I'm like, check out the first one. I think it was stronger in general than the second one though, right? It's just if you're going to pick one that you're just going to see how he's written, none of these are in continuity, right? For the most part, I think there's 1 or 2 stories that they kind of set you up as like, you end up meeting the cousin that hates Brakenbraw and Brakenbraw hates him. And if they meet, it's like a fight to the death, but it never really is a death, but they're both brutes. And so they can both take it. It's just insane. It's out of control, violent humor, but like violent in the punching sense, but not violent in the shooting sense, if that makes sense. There are some shootouts, and like I said, people do die, but it's not the main focus of the story ever. It's not, and it's not like it turns it into a comedy, but it doesn't really make it serious either. Imagine if you're part of the generation that watched Tom and Jerry cartoons and Looney Tunes in the 80s, you get it. You get, that's what I'm talking about. Brakenbraw would have been to the 30s what the Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry were for us Gen X kids. Somewhere in the 90s, political correctness ended up making Tom and Jerry kids and Looney Tune kids and Disney kids and Muppet Baby kids. Everything became childrenerified versions of the more violent versions that the Gen X kids grew up with. Anyways, that's enough of that. We're gonna move on.